she say? This is impossible. This is not right. Where's the wimp?
That's Faye Dunaway in a bad dress, and Supergirl in the cape and tights in Supergirl, one of 5 new movies we'll be reviewing this week on At the Movies, the movie review program. And I'm Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune.
I'm Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times. In addition to Supergirl, starring Helen Slater as the Woman of Steel, we'll also be reviewing opera superstar Placido Domingo in Carmen, Gene Hackman and Teresa Russell in Eureka, a new documentary named The Times of Harvey Milk, and first Gene starts with a very strange new film by Robert Altman.
Secret Honor is a film version of a play about Richard Nixon, about Nixon now, years after Watergate, talking into a tape recorder and a video camera for posterity, rambling on about Watergate, about his childhood, about every single slight or insult he's ever suffered in his life. Nixon is played by Philip Baker Hall, and it's a magnificent performance, more than a caricature, a high-intensity interpretation of Nixon with some dialogue that's fanciful, but most of the dialogue is taken from the public record or from Nixon's printed memoirs. Here, for example, is Nixon in his study on a tear about how President Eisenhower used to snub him.
I am not your thinking caddy anymore. Everyone used to say that Adlai Stevenson was Hamlet. No, that is not true. It was me who was really Hamlet, and Ike was the king. I never even got to see all the rooms in the White House until Johnson became president. Ike introduced me to a crowd one time as Nick Dixon. Ike. What he would do, he would drag his coattails and he would pull them away, and he would leave me standing there high and dry. So I was running. I was always running. I was trying so hard to make the team that I was always off sides. Well, just like my old man, he sold the lemon grove. Then they discovered oil on it. Well, not me. Not to the manner born. You see, I had to pretend not to see all the snubs and the sniggers and the sneers. I had to put up a front. Welcome to Denmark. My first debate when I was in high school resolved girls are no good, and I won. My second debate resolved cows are better than horses. You see, I always hated girls. In high school, I couldn't stay away from them. You know how it is when you're nuts. You know what I did? I founded the Orthogonian Society. That's all boys, no girls, just square shooters.
Just square shooters. This is really amazing. This film goes on like that for a full hour and a half, often getting quite foul-mouthed, as the Watergate tapes proved Nixon to be. Now, what's the point of this film? Is it just a bait Nixon picture? Well, first of all, it is a grand entertainment. Richard Nixon, no matter whether you hate him or love him, is one of the most fascinating characters, of course, of the 20th century. And second, I think this film wants to make the point that the American public had ample opportunity to know exactly who Richard Nixon was, politically and psychologically. He'd been around for a long, long time. And therefore, anybody now pointing their finger at him ought to be accompanied by some pointing fingers at those who voted for him. And finally, I think that the film wants to say something about American politics, that perhaps you have to be a little crazy to want so intensely to be president that you wind up getting your wish. Secret Honor was directed by Robert Altman, and credit him and actor Philip Baker Hall for a most remarkable entertainment that I'd be willing to sit through at least one more time right now. This picture, and it's hard to tell just from that single clip, this picture left me breathless.
It was just an amazing experience for me, too. And the funny thing is, going into the theater, you have the same kind of response in a way that you had after hearing a description of My Dinner with Andre. In other words, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to see one actor talk for an hour and a half. That doesn't really sound like something I want to do. This movie is so mesmerizing that for those 90 minutes, I was absolutely riveted every second by the intensity of this performance by Hall, by the way that Altman moves his camera to absolutely mirror these emotional states, and then also by the information. Now, it is a fiction, and I don't believe most of the terrible, libelous things that this film has to say about Richard Nixon. But the funny thing is, at the end of the film, now maybe this is a little different than your reaction, I felt more affection for Nixon than I felt when I walked in. It made him more human.
I don't know if I felt affection. I sort of did feel sorry for him. I really did. And I felt that I had seen a full range of a person, which I don't think I'd gotten very much of. And I think that's the real accomplishment of this film. I mean, how many movies actually give you a full character, a really rich character? This character in this movie is as rich as Richard Nixon really is.
And is on screen more than any other character in any movie this year because he's the only character. You know, I think this is going to be the first valley of a whole centuries of speculation about this man Nixon. He is so complicated and probably, in many ways, the most interesting president we've had in this century. Next at the movies, Placido Domingo in Bizet's Carmen, an opera. About the legend of Carmen, the tempestuous gypsy girl who captures the hearts of men, that has fascinated storytellers for years. Just before this year, for example, there were already 14 different film versions of Carmen, including Dorothy Dandridge as Carmen Jones, and versions starring Dolores Del Rio and Rita Hayworth. Now in 1984, we've already seen Carlos Saura's Spanish flamenco version of Carmen, and Jean-Luc Godard's dramatic First Name Carmen. And now here's an ambitious film version of the Bizet opera itself, directed by the Italian Francesco Rosi, and starring the superstar tenor Placido Domingo as the army officer who falls under Carmen's spell.
Je suis comme un libre, si je sais, si je livre, ta promesse, tu la tiendras. Carmen, tu
That's Julia McGinnis Johnson as Carmen, and she's the real discovery of this movie. A tempestuous, romantic Carmen who really does seem to have the power to enslave men. And if we can't believe that about a Carmen in a movie or in the opera, then we can't believe very much about it at all. She is a relative newcomer, a New Yorker of Irish and Puerto Rican background who was rather daringly cast opposite the great Domingo, and the casting works in this movie. This is a lusty, energetic, unashamedly romantic film that's been wonderfully photographed on locations in Spain that include a hilltop village that could even have been a set for Romeo and Juliet. Carmen is great to look at and great to listen to, and because the film uses subtitles, which you don't get when you go to the opera, of course, in the theater, it's even great for a change to be able to follow the story.
I didn't like it quite as much as you did. I enjoyed it because of her, but not because of him. Now, he has a marvelous voice, but I didn't think that he was much of a presence in the movie as an actor, and I found that the director seemed to be shooting the sides of his face and didn't seem to give us enough of his face so that we could enjoy him. He didn't seem very charismatic, and when his turn about came and he suddenly attracted to Carmen in the prison there, I didn't believe it for a second. So it's sort of half a movie. She's charismatic as an actress. He's fabulous as a singer.
Well, this is, of course, a generic problem in all opera movies, is that by the time you get to the point where you can sing an opera, can you still act at all? Since most, if you'll forgive me, most acting in operas on stage is very stiff and very artificial and very strange. It seems to me that he is at least convincing enough here, and particularly since he is kind of the straight guy, and the whole movie has to be carried by Carmen and by her acting.
Yeah. So, I liked it a little bit, but not quite as much as you. Coming up next at the movies, what has long blonde hair and flies? Film Supergirl is a major disappointment, containing none of the humor or special effects or, frankly, even the acting of the recent Superman series of movies. Instead, this Supergirl looks like a quickie cash-in on Superman ripoff featuring the lackluster Helen Slater as the Girl of Steel.
The Omega Hedron, Selena. I want it.
Well then, Supergirl, you shall have it.
It is really sad to see Faye Dunaway shaking a branch in a movie wearing a ridiculous dress. Right there you see the problem with Supergirl. The movie has neither a charismatic hero nor an intriguing villain. Faye Dunaway is playing a role built for Hermione Gingold. Dunaway is much too slick to play such a heavy character part, and I probably ought to apologize to Hermione Gingold. She has better taste than that, a finer actress than that. She wouldn't get caught dead in this movie. But Faye Dunaway should be playing a more slick villain. And as for my money, Supergirl should have been played by somebody more like Karen Allen, a little tougher, a little hipper, just as cute. There are dozens of other problems with this film, but I'll leave it at a bad hero, a bad villain, lousy special effects, and a dumb script.
Is that it?
That's the list.
Okay, you know, you've been trying to put Karen Allen in every picture that came out this fall, except the one that she was in.
That's right.
I'll tell you, I'm usually a sucker for a movie that has lines like, "The Amiga Hedron, Selena, I want it." You know, but this movie is a total disaster, and it's a real disappointment. And part of it is that they don't play it straight, if you will.
Yes.
I mean, even though there were comic moments in the other Superman movies, the good ones, especially the first one, took itself seriously, and then you can build on that. But Superman, at least, has to seem as if he believes that he has these powers and that he's involved in the situation.
Yes.
This movie doesn't really give us that from Supergirl or from any of the other characters. It's a sideshow.
I wish they had just ripped it off moment for moment. And then the beginning segments in Smallville, when Superman grows up, were wonderful odes to rural America.
Glenn Ford.
Why can't we do that again? Why can't we see him have fun on dates and stuff like that? This movie just is some kind of camp quickie
Yeah,
effort.
it's just kind of like this is a switch. It's a human version of a Saturday morning cartoon. Next at the movies, Gene Hackman as the world's richest man and Theresa Russell as the daughter who drives him mad.
It's right here. I can see it. The gold.
Eureka, and it's a very strange film by a director named Nicholas Roeg, who has made some other strange films, including David Bowie and The Man Who Fell to Earth and Mick Jagger in performance. This time he tells the story of an obsessed gold prospector, played by Gene Hackman, who marches for 15 years through the frozen wastelands of the Yukon before a fortune teller mysteriously appears to him in a dream while he's about to freeze to death and guides him toward the greatest gold discovery of all time. Nicholas Roeg is a master of great visual effects, and here's the scene where Hackman finds that gold. Then the movie jumps ahead to the 1940s, where a very rich Gene Hackman is jealous of the playboy who marries his daughter.
There's only one golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The rest is conversation.
You didn't earn the gold, Jack. You took it from nature. You raped the earth.
I found it.
You stole it.
What the hell you do, pluck chickens for a living?
Stop it, please.
He only does it to annoy because he knows it teases.
Tracy in Wonderland.
The Mad Hatter's tea party. This is it.
There's no chocolate inside.
How you can't undo it, Mr. D'Amato. It's gold. But Jack likes to give gold presents after dinner.
Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
You can't take it with you.
What are you doing?
Get out of my house! It's only gold, Jack. Like all things, it'll pass. And when it does, I'll send it back to you.
That's Theresa Russell as the daughter and Rutger Hauer as her husband. And in a more ordinary movie, you'd be more or less able to predict what's going to happen next in Eureka, with the father and the daughter and the playboy all fighting it out for the gold. But Eureka is a very complicated movie in which the supernatural sometimes plays a role. And part of Russell's destiny seems to involve a merger of some sort between her soul and the soul of her father. Eureka is overwrought and overblown and overcomplicated and not altogether successful, but it has wonderful performances by Hackman and Russell, and it has so many great-looking scenes that I guess I do recommend it, even though I have some problems with it.
I have a lot of problems with it, overblown over whatever else you said. I agree. Too much over. And I thought unnecessarily so, because the story, essential story, is quite compelling, if not original, which is a case of a person hunting for something, finding it, and finding that they enjoyed the hunt more than the acquisition. And I enjoyed that story, and if it had been told without some of the supernatural mumbo-jumbo, we could see it in that discovery scene. I mean, here's the discovery of gold. Why not tell it in a little bit more straightforward narrative fashion rather than all this stuff?
Well, I'll tell you why, and that's because Nicholas Roeg in all of his movies involves the supernatural. This is not a screenplay inspired by Jack London or somebody like that. This is a Nicholas Roeg screenplay in which people do enter from out of memories and out of the past and out of alternative sorts of reality. You know, and that's the kind of movie he makes. Look at Don't Look Now, the Venetian movie, or Walkabout.
Those are wonderful films involving the supernatural that were clear and a little bit more clear and straightforward. This it actually didn't even look pretty in those scenes that we just saw with the snow and all that. It wasn't a majestic moment. All I can say is that in Walkabout, it's magical. Don't Look Now, Venice is magical. Didn't work here.
Well, but I think in the case of Nicholas Roeg, you at least have to let him do the thing that he does and then say whether it works or not, instead of asking him to make a more simple, straightforward film, which is not his...
Then I'll say it didn't work.
Now you're learning. Okay.
Thank you. Gee, I'm a quick study. Our next film is called The Times of Harvey Milk, and it's a documentary on the San Francisco city supervisor and gay rights leader who was murdered in 1978 along with the mayor of San Francisco by a politician who, at least in this film, represents the so-called traditional American values that certainly don't include the tolerating, let alone the practicing, of homosexuality. Part of the film introduces us to Harvey Milk, and we find him to be a charismatic, energetic politician with a solid sense of how to win votes from straights and from gays.
Harvey said that if anyone solved the dog problem in the city, that they could be elected mayor. And so he started in the first month of being in City Hall to come up with some kind of ordinance to take care of dogs. So the day of his press conference for the Pooper Scooper ordinance, he went out early and planted some.
Supervisor Milk took to the grassy lawn at DuBose Park this afternoon to publicize the new law.
I think what happened is what happened in New York, that people use their own ingenuity, their own ideas, their own concepts. Some people using their pie tins, some people using the Wall Street Journal.
Milk put his foot down to emphasize that the city intends to enforce, and you guessed it, in Supervisor Milk's words, this really is the bottom line.
Now, he comes off as a likable guy and a pretty clever politician. Now, after we build up a lot of affection for this guy, his murder, of course, seems that much more senseless and perverse. But then The Times of Harvey Milk, the film, goes on to make a larger point about the sexism of the establishment as we see a jury of straights sentence Harvey Milk's killer to only 8 years in prison. And then he was paroled after serving only 5 years. Only 5 years for killing a mayor and a city supervisor. The film argues convincingly, in my opinion, that if only the mayor had been killed, the sentence would have been a lot longer. But somehow, the killing of a gay man was not that objectionable to the jury, and so Harvey Milk, according to this film, was killed a second time, really, by the jury. What can I say except that the film held me transfixed as I watched An American Tragedy?
Well, I agree with you. It's a very good film. I liked it a lot. The first parts especially, which tell the story of how Harvey Milk became a politician and became a successful politician, are a very interesting chapter in American society. I disagree with the conclusion of the film, which you apparently share, that the jury essentially murdered Milk and murdered the mayor a second time. I think if you look into the case, you'll find that a lot of people thought that Dan White had a very good defense, and the prosecution did a very bad job of presenting the case against him and made a tactical error by allowing his so-called Twinkie defense with his, you know, please forgive me, and I don't know what made me do it, and I ate too much junk food, and so forth. And so that the movie, of course, never allows you to meet any of those jurors who might have a different story to tell. It only uses interested witnesses who only tell the side of the story that is basically has this message to make, which is that society is going to destroy somebody who's gay.
Yeah, well, and of course, we've seen that happen throughout a lot of society, and we've seen it happen in how long it's taken to get any kind of representation, which is what the film really, I think, is about, representation for the people. Here comes a representative. He gets knocked off. His killer gets a short term. It's quite a moving story. I found it fascinating to see all these people who didn't represented who didn't particularly like him, but were captivated by him. We see that with one labor union leader that's quite fascinating. So I don't think it's all total pro him. I think
It's a very, it's one of the best documentaries I've seen in a long time. I just feel that the ending is very slanted into trying to make this jury represent something that the jury may not represent.
But it's hard to believe. 8-year sentence for murdering a mayor and a city supervisor. Okay. Very hard to believe.
Well, that's, I guess, the point the film is making. Now let's take another look at the movies we reviewed on this program. We both voted thumbs up on Secret Honor, the shocking and brilliant Robert Altman film about the confessions of Richard Nixon. And 2 more thumbs up for Carmen with Placido Domingo and the opera by Bizet. I liked it even more than Gene because of its tempestuous, romantic energy. 2 thumbs down, though, for Supergirl, a dreary and disconnected super flop, despite what I thought, although Gene didn't, was an engaging performance by Helen Slater. A split decision on Eureka, with Gene Hackman as the richest man in the world. We both found things wrong with the film, but I admired its energy and its visual imagination enough to recommend it. And finally, 2 thumbs up for The Times of Harvey Milk, the emotional documentary about the lives and deaths of San Francisco Mayor George Moscone and City Supervisor Harvey Milk.
You guessed it.
Well, that's it for this week. Join us next time when we'll review 4 new films, the first of the holiday blockbusters, including Beverly Hills Cop, starring Eddie Murphy as a police detective used to working not quite so richly a beat as Beverly Hills. And we'll also review City Heat, another kind of detective picture set in the 1930s, the first film to star both Clint Eastwood and Burt Reynolds. I wonder who gets top billing between those 2 big stars. That's next time, and until then, we'll see you at the movies.